On this episode of Road Dirt, we talk with America's unofficial motorcycling ambassador, Robert Pandya. Stay tuned. This Road Dirt presentation is brought to you by Law Tigers, motorcycle lawyers. Find them at lawtigers.com. Hey, this is Rob with Road Dirt, and we are with Robert Pandya here at the Progressive International Motorcycle Shows. We're at the Georgia International Horse Park. First time it's been at this event. And really, I was talking with Lauren Lloyd yesterday. This is the first time the IMS has been back in Atlanta for, 12 years.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
It's been a long time. Yeah. And to come back and be outdoors is
that
just
was,
phenomenal.
the pandemic kind of forced our play on that, but that's actually something that as a team we've been talking about for a while, to do some outdoor shows, right? And and where you would do them, that it could be anything. But with our focus on demos, you want to be someplace where you actually want to ride a motorcycle. Like doing a demo event in the middle of downtown Chicago would suck, right?
Yeah,
so
big time.
So anyway, it really kind of put all of our plans into high gear, made us rethink what the show is. We rebranded the show to IMS Outdoors to kind of reflect that it's not just the international motorcycle shows minus a roof, right? It's different. And this year we've had some bumps and starts in there, but I think the core of what we got going on is pretty good. And as our audience sort of learns what the shows are all about, I think it's going to, continue to draw more people, because this is one where, it's a real rider show, and I don't care how many buddies you have at dealerships or whatever, you cannot demo as many motorcycles as what's out here. It's insane.
I was talking with a guy yesterday. I was up for somebody yesterday as well who was telling me, he was like, dude, I got to hop on one bike after another,
Yeah.
brand to brand to brand. And I said, that's the genius of this model that IMS has gone to.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that, again, when people realize that you can get on a bike, and I think some people, they're like, oh, I'm a sport bike guy, so I'm never gonna ride that Goldwing, or I'm never gonna ride that, that Kawasaki Vulcan, but you're like, let's try something outside of the norm.
Yeah. Then
all of a sudden you realize that you're not a sport bike guy, you're just a motorcycle guy.
Yeah.
And your world opens up. When I worked, we were talking earlier about my time at Aprilia, and when I worked at Aprilia, it was my first OEM I worked with, and I was a super bike snob, man. I was like, everything else is crap. Why would you want, why wouldn't you want a bike with only 40 horsepower or something like, you know what I mean?
I know that mentality.
And I borrowed, I got cajoled into borrowing a Victory Kingpin from Derek Scott, was the marketing manager for Victory at the time when I met him, and he was from Austin, where I'd gone to school, and so we kind of hit it off, and he kept wanting to borrow Aprilia, so I'm like, yeah, sure. He said, you got to borrow a Victory. I'm like, oh yeah,
right.
Well, yeah, I know my
cruiser,
my poop doesn't stink over here, but yours, I don't know about. And I borrowed a Kingpin, and I was only going to ride it for a day. I ended up keeping it all weekend, and I absolutely love that bike. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the, that eventually I became the Victory PR manager, but it really opened my eyes, and now I'm, I sit on 13, 14 motorcycles, and they're all different, and they're, it's all the world of motorcycling.
And you love,
I love
something to love in each one of them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's right. How long have you been with the IMS? You've been with them for a number of years now, with International Motorcycle Shows, several years.
Yeah, it's funny, because when a lot of people look at my career, I was with Aprilia for 10 years, and I was working with the two Indian motorcycles in Victory for 10 years. So there's 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. And on top of that, I would do little side gigs, and I ended up doing a ton of other stuff, right? So I would run Buell track day events, for instance. And
Oh, wow.
one of the other gigs I did was being spokesperson for the motorcycle shows.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have a life, man. I worked my ass off.
No, you did have a life.
Yeah,
That is the life, according to some people.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. My sister worries about me, but anyway, so that relationship with IMS, it goes back like the entire length of my career in motorcycling.
Yeah.
Because I used to go to IMS Dallas before I worked for Aprilia, just when I worked at a local dealer.
Yeah.
And which is where I met the Aprilia marketing manager, and then just things kind of grew from. So it's literally been 25 years.
Yeah.
And the
awesome.
shows existed for 41. So, I mean, it's been a great relationship. And IMS is the team that runs this show are unbelievably good.
The ones we've worked with.
Yeah, they're amazing.
They know their stuff.
And it's largely women. The show is run by women. That's probably why it runs so well.
That's exactly right.
But anyway, it's been a long relationship, and I've gotten to do a lot of stuff. I developed the Discover the Ride with them. I produced videos for them. We did stage content. I got to be on with Katie Couric.
Oh, cool.
On Today Show as a spokesperson, and so it's been fantastic, and I owe a large part of certainly the visible part of my career to the team at IMS, and specifically to Tracy Harris, who's the VP of the company now. So
Robert has been a big name in motorcycling and motorcycle journalism, motorcycle magazine, motorcycle news, and things like that. You may not realize how big a name you are. In a lot of respects, I've been reading your stuff for years, in the different publications I've freelanced and written for. I've seen you at events and in motorcycle journalism. In a lot of ways, I almost think of you as like America's motorcycling ambassador.
That's kind.
And because of the fact that you have a relationship with so many brands, and you're such an advocate, almost an evangelist for the power sports industry. And I think that's a great position that they need somebody like you. The industry does, and especially in the last 10 to 15 years. And how far back in your life, even beyond working for a dealership where it all started, how did you grow up riding bikes as a kid and stuff? Or?
No, the opposite. My dad,
Really?
my dad was a doctor, and my mom was a nurse. So all they knew of motorcycling was like the worst parts of it, right? And
they were donor cycles to them.
Yeah,
right?
it was. I mean, that was in the era when hurricanes and ninjas were starting to pop up, and guys were getting on mostly guys were getting on motorcycles, ride them too fast, didn't have the training, and bad stuff happened. And it's just like every day, like thousands of planes are in the air, but only when one has a problem, it doesn't make the news. And it's the same thing with motorcycling. As I try, it's like nobody comes home and goes like, I'm alive. You know what I mean? Right. It's like, you're fine. Right. And, I wrote an article about the first time that motorcycling entered my consciousness as a young adult. And it was a story about how we were parked. I was on the wrong side of the rental station wagon sometime in the 70s. And we were in front of Mann's Chinese Theater, on a family vacation. And my sister got the seat where the stars were and everything, and I was all kind of bummed out because I couldn't, I didn't see that. And this, what I know now was like a hand shift Harley came rolling up next to me, and it was like, just like shaking, right?
Yeah.
And the guy would look straight ZZ Top, beard on him, and like little black helmet and just black t-shirt, and I just remember it, just looking at this machine, and the forks were like, and I was like, how is he holding on to this animal?
This monster.
And I'm like watching, and I remember seeing this cable that came off the front, and the cable's like whipping around and everything like that, and this thing was just alive. and I like my eyes like traced up the bike, and I was kind of scared to look at the devil himself, right? and like I look at him, and he's staring right at me, right through the car window, and he gives me this big toothy grin, and just blips the throttle, and I probably jumped out of my seat, and he took off, and I'm like, hey, Mom, Dad, did you see that? Okay. And they're just like sitting in front of the car, like, don't look, don't look, don't look, don't look, don't look, you know? And that a man or a person can control something like that, like blew my mind as a kid.
Yeah.
And that always stuck with me. But I was never allowed to have dirt bikes or anything like that. So I didn't get on a motorcycle till I was 17.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then back, at that point it was just purely transportation. And then I started meeting community, and I started learning that, there's other bikes besides my lowly Suzuki GN 250, and really got into it. So yeah.
That's cool. I've never heard that story before, but I think so many of us in motorcycling have an early impression story like that. Something that imprinted on you,
right? And
you never forgot it, and
right.
You ended
and
up
I think
coming
that's
back
something
to it.
that, like, as you go over to the vintage display over there,
Yeah.
and there's a yellow Honda Z50, like an original Z50,
Yeah, I
sitting
saw
up
that.
on the crate up there,
Uh-huh.
and that's such an iconic bike from that era. But as we march on in time, that wasn't the first bike people would have. Now it's starting to get to be like XRs and and stuff like that, or an OSET electric trials bike for a kid, or or whatever. But that first interaction with a motorcycle, the way it sticks with you, is critical. And that's taking that several steps further back is why I've gotten involved with Strider and All Kids Bike, and became an ambassador with them, is because that's where it all started. It's on bicycles, and the work that Strider's doing. And I'm very proud to say that the IMS show has donated a all kids bike program in every market we've gone to.
Yeah.
And that's $5,000. It's a 5-year program for a school.
Mm-hmm.
And we're literally building our own market for people who are going to be families that are going to want to come and see what powersports is all about. So.
Yeah, back in what was it? It was like February or March. We actually did a story on a Strider partnership with Pro Twin Performance, Baxter's Garage. Kevin Baxter, noteworthy customizer and engine builder, up in Walton County, and a school that they donated. And we had a whole day at their shop putting bikes together.
Is that cool?
Well, it was so cool being a part of that.
It's so raw, and the thing is that motorcycling, for most people, that got a chance to touch it and be around it when they were young. In a modern era, that's harder to come across. There's not the empty field across the street from my house where I used to, that you get the cops called on you in like no time flat, right? But bicycling as an early access, that is something that can help power sports. And but that first feel of the wind or coasting down a hill, and being in control of this thing that moves you faster than your feet can, is like, it's such an addictive thing.
Like what you saw in your car window as a kid.
That's it, and it's for us. There's been elements of the motorcycle industry that are doing surprisingly well. And there's other areas that are going to be a challenge, if we don't continue to work for new ridership.
Big time.
Well,
tell me a little bit about the Discover the Ride. You're a part of Discover the Ride, and you've kind of touched on Strider, and we believe in Strider. Tell me a little bit about Discover the Ride, how that developed, and what you see as the goal of it.
Yeah, Discover the Ride. I'll go quick. I'll do you a quick version of the long story. So my first time ever touching a thing with a throttle, at whatever it was, 16, 17 years old, something like that, was like a pull start, like scooter thing, right? Well, they didn't tell me how to slow down. And so the thing gets going, I pin it, I go through a bush into a tree, and I'm like, that was awesome, right?
Of course.
So the hook is set, right? Anyway, that informed Discover the Ride, believe it or not. because that fear factor of giving it too much throttle, and whiskey throttle we call it commonly, right? And the bike just rocketing out of control, and you're just locked and along for the ride. We had to engineer that out of these bikes. And so our friends at Zero Motorcycles, I own a Zero, love the brand, really neat motorbikes. They worked with me on a throttle program that limits the bike to 11 miles an hour, but it also greatly limits the acceleration. I mean, it's literally the most boring motorcycle to ride, here, because it goes 11 and it takes a while to get up to that speed. But what we've engineered out of it is that initial fear, that initial overwhelming thrust
is gradual
thing, right? And of course they're electric, so there's no heat, there's no noise, no vibration, and so that there's none of that to distract you. And of course there's no clutch or shifting. And so that program was born out of Tracy and the IMS team asking me, "Hey, Mr. Idea Guy, what do you want to do? What's your big idea?" I'm like, "Let's do rider training indoors inside a convention center."
Yep, I've seen that in recent
Which we
years.
could only do on electric.
Right.
And we used to lay out a carpeted course, and a figure eight basically, and that let people ride electric motorcycles inside the show. And it was it's an important program because it was a catalyst, and I'll give IMS and our work full credit for this. Discover the Ride was an absolute catalyst for the Ride With Us program that the MIC, because MSF training was like a 4-day commitment. That was their only item on the menu, right? Sort of for a beginning rider's course, right?
Yeah.
And there wasn't this discovery program, which is what I wanted Discover the Ride to be. And that's not, Discover the Ride's not training. I'm not saying that it's a replacement for MSF.
Right.
It's experience management. It's that managing that first experience so it's a positive one, and people can get off the bike and feel successful at that level. And then they ended up like shrinking a curriculum down to its bare bones to do the clutch exercise in first gear, just crawling along. Well, years ago they never ever would have considered it. But Discover the Ride, we did a great job, frankly, and we got a lot of people who had never ridden a motorcycle before on a bike inside the show with professional instructors. Lee Parks and Total Control really stepped up to help form that program and co-write the curricula and stuff. And that's the basis of Discover the Ride, is to say that no, we as an industry can make motorcycling more approachable. We have the technology to do
now
that.
We do. Yes, we do.
We've always had that, because frankly, you could do this with an old Honda CT 110, put it in first gear, pull the shift lever off, and put a throttle limiter on it. And I just built you a gas version of our training bikes. That's true. And there's millions of those things floating around, right? So that technology is out there, and there's I think it's called the KLX 110 or the 140 that has an auto clutch little dirt bike option, right? So you can teach the basics of this stuff and limit a motorcycle to have a good positive first experience, right? So Discover the Ride did that. It's awesome. That's been a successful program for the MIC and for MSF. And then even the Harley Davidson program, where they have motorcycles that are limited to 12 miles an hour, and they and they have that first like sort of clutch experience. They developed a program, I would say largely in response to the success we had with Discover the Ride. So we can do it. We get arrogant as an industry, and it can get a little bit frustrating because we like talking to those of us who already get it. Yeah. And that's true. And when we take the time to widen our scope to somebody new coming in, this industry can be incredibly inventive and exciting. And
there can be a renaissance in riding.
Absolutely. And that's what Discover the Ride was all about, was to be the rock, throw it into the pond, create the ripples of some rider training and experience.
Happening.
And it's happened. Absolutely.
It is.
Yeah.
It's
I'm proud of that work, for sure.
Yep. you guys are doing a great work too. It's phenomenal being able to follow it and see it. And now across the shows this summer, what's been the response to not only the shows outdoors in general, in your estimation, but specifically Discover the Ride, Strider, things like that, Continue the Ride? What have you seen as a response so far for its first year going outdoors?
Well, on the OEM, I'll start with the OEMs. They're super happy because there's a load of demos that go out, and as we know right now, there's a dearth of motorcycles at dealerships, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Inventory is really low.
Yeah,
so to be able to walk
bad,
into this area and have access to whatever it is, 200 to 300 motorcycles that you can ride is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely incredible. So they love it. Customers who come here for demo rides, again, they get to touch and ride this stuff, so they're really enjoying it. We'd like to see more people coming in through the gates. We don't want to just be a demo show. It needs to be vendors, and it needs to be other stuff, and it's a bit of yin yang, right? You need people to have vendors, and you need vendors to have people. And so as we have shifted from an indoor program to an outdoor program, we haven't had as many people come through the gates as we would like to see, obviously. But it's also a significant, 41 years of indoor convention hall winter dates.
Yeah. And
shifting that significantly, that's a huge, rudder of our ship, right?
It's an entire paradigm shift.
It is that, right? And so that's where we really need, people like you. We need the OEMs to broadcast that we're going to be doing demos here, not just Honda demos. It's nice for Honda to say that they're doing Honda demos, but if in the background there's some like out of focus Yamahas, is that so bad, really?
Right. We're all
a Honda guy will say,
a rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah,
and they all kind of need to understand that.
Yeah, and I was talking to like Paul Gomez over at National Cycles, been in the industry for just decades, and we were talking about how it's incumbent on all of us who work in this show to spread the news about the show, to elevate the entire industry, right? And that's the goal here. And if you're getting messages as a consumer from an email blast from this brand, and then you see a Facebook story pop up from this other brand, and then you see you get like a text alert from your last demo ride that you did that, hey, demos, all of a sudden it's coming in from a bunch of different, you're like, wow, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And rising tide, as you said, and everyone's doing well. Success in our industry is not necessarily getting 50% of the population to learn how to ride motorcycles. Success in our industry is to take the 7% who already do ride and bump it up to 8.
Yeah.
And so that's that fractional kind of work, that those steps that we can take together to elevate motorcycling, and everybody will be stoked. Everyone will make their Christmas bonuses, and
there you go.
Life is good.
And we pass on our sport to the next generation.
Yeah, totally. And it's different. It is different. Like you're not riding your Z50 out in the field across the street anymore. That's things have changed. So we have to, as an industry, we have to adapt and change and promote this new form of ridership and Strider Cup events and BMX races that all grow into power sports.
So we need to show the next generation that what they can put in their hands is more than some kind of electronic device. We can put throttles and handlebars back in their hands, and they can enjoy life away from the screen, out in the real world.
Yeah, I say in Strider conversations that you can't hold your phone and a handlebars at the same time.
Exactly. That's right, man. How can folks get in touch with you and learn more about what you're doing and your role in all this? How can folks get with you?
Well, on a business
what would you prefer?
Well, on a business end, honestly, I keep pretty active on LinkedIn, right? And as you said, that's where you and I met.
That's where we found each other.
And I'll post up stories and clips of videos that we've done and whatever. I think as an industry, we can have more conversation on LinkedIn. I think that's a really interesting place to do that. And
look up Robert Pandya on LinkedIn.
Yeah, easy to do. And then, and I'm Robert Pandya everywhere. There's a Dr. Robert Pandya out in California who's not too pleased.
Different dude.
Yeah, different guy. But I'm like, And so, that said, I'm also on Facebook with Gearheads Road Trip.
Yes, that's right. That's a cool group.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. And that's just more, my personal enthusiast stuff.
Yeah.
And Gearheads Road Trip is also Instagram too. So
Gearhead Road Trip.
Yeah.
Gearheads
Heads.
Road Trip.
Yeah, it's not one.
It's all of us. It's all of us.
Gearheads.
That's right. We're all
Plural.
Gearheads.
Yeah.
Robert, I appreciate your time,
Hey,
man. Thanks
thank
for
you
having
very
us in
much.
your Airstream, and thanks for a good cup of coffee and great conversation. Appreciate you.
Hey, I appreciate your work, and look forward to going out there and riding with you someday.
Let's do it, man. This is Robert and Robert with Road Dirt. Ride life.
Catch you later.